We live in a world that quietly runs on trust. Most of the time, we don't even notice it. You wake up, check your bank balance, swipe a card, send money through an app, and go on with your day without a second thought. Behind every one of those actions is an assumption so deeply ingrained that it feels like a law of nature. The system will work as promised. You trust that the number on your screen actually represents something real. You trust that your bank will still be there tomorrow. You trust that the institution holding your money won't suddenly decide you can't access it. You trust that the currency you earn today will still hold value next year. None of this is guaranteed by physics. None of it is enforced by mathematics. It all rests on belief. Trust, at its core, is emotional. It's human. It's the decision to accept vulnerability because we believe someone else will act responsibly. That works beautifully in small groups. Families run on trust. Friendships depend on it. Even local communities can function this way. But as systems grow larger, more abstract, and more centralized, trust begins to stretch thin. Modern money is perhaps the largest trust experiment humanity has ever conducted. We trust central banks to manage supply wisely. We trust governments not to abuse their monetary power. We trust corporations to play fair. We trust intermediaries to keep records accurately and honestly. And most of the time, things seem fine until they aren't. History is littered with moments when trust evaporated overnight. Banks closed their doors. Savings were frozen. Currencies collapsed under hyperinflation. Lifelong work was wiped out not by personal failure, but by decisions made far away by people no one voted for and could not challenge. In those moments, people didn't suddenly become untrustworthy. The system revealed what it had always been, dependent on promises. The uncomfortable truth is that trust does not scale well. The more power you concentrate, the more tempting it becomes to misuse it. The more complex the system, the harder it is for ordinary people to verify what's actually happening. So instead of verification, we rely on authority. Instead of certainty, we accept reassurance. Instead of truth, we settle for confidence. This is not a moral failure. It's a structural one. Humans are not evil by default, but we are inconsistent. We are emotional. We respond to incentives. Any system that assumes perfect behavior from imperfect beings is fragile by design. Money, however, is unforgiving. It touches survival. It determines access to food, shelter, healthcare, education, and opportunity. When a monetary system fails, the consequences are not philosophical. They are painfully real. And yet, for centuries, we have accepted that money must be built on trust because we believed there was no alternative. We were told that trust is the price of participation. If you want to be part of the economy, you must believe in the institutions that govern it. Questioning them was seen as naive at best and dangerous at worst. The rules were too complex, the machinery too vast, and the gatekeepers too powerful for any meaningful challenge. But underneath all of this lies a quiet contradiction. If money is meant to be a tool for coordination, why does it require blind faith? If it is meant to be neutral, why does it depend so heavily on human discretion? If it is meant to be reliable, why does it change so dramatically depending on who is in charge? At some point, a different question had to be asked. Not how to find better people to trust, but how to remove the need for trust altogether. Not how to make authorities more benevolent, but how to design a system that remains fair even when participants are selfish. Not how to promise restraint, but how to enforce rules without asking permission. This question goes against instinct. We are social creatures. We are taught from childhood that trust is a virtue, but there is a crucial distinction we often miss. Trusting people can be noble. Trusting systems blindly is reckless, especially when those systems hold power over our lives. What if money didn't require you to believe anyone's word? What if its rules were transparent, predictable, and impossible to change on a whim? What if participation didn't depend on approval and security didn't depend on reputation? What if, instead of asking you to trust, the system simply invited you to verify? For a long time, these ideas sounded like fantasy. Every attempt at alternative money eventually circled back to the same problem. Someone had to be in charge. Someone had to keep the ledger. Someone had to enforce the rules. And as long as someone was in charge, trust remained unavoidable. Then, quietly, an idea appeared that refused to play by those assumptions. It didn't promise better leaders or stronger institutions. It didn't ask for loyalty or belief. It didn't even ask to be trusted. It asked only one thing, that you check the math. That idea was Bitcoin. Bitcoin did not arrive with fanfare. There was no grand announcement, no press conference, no charismatic founder asking the world to believe in a new vision. It appeared quietly, almost anonymously, like a note slipped under the door of a system that had grown far too comfortable with being trusted. What made Bitcoin radical was not that it was digital money. Digital money already existed. What made it different was the assumption it started from. Do not trust anyone. Not governments, not banks, not corporations, not even the creator of the system itself. This was a complete inversion of how financial systems had always worked. Traditionally, money begins with authority. A central issuer defines what is valid. Trusted intermediaries keep records. Disputes are resolved by institutions with power. Everything flows from the idea that someone must be in charge, and that the rest of us must accept their oversight. Bitcoin rejected that premise outright. It asked a more uncomfortable question. What if no one deserves that much trust? This wasn't cynicism for its own sake. It was realism. Bitcoin assumed that people act in their own interest, that incentives matter, and that power, when centralized, eventually gets abused. Instead of trying to fix human nature, it worked around it. In Bitcoin, there is no central ledger controlled by a single entity. There is no administrator who can quietly rewrite history. There is no authority that can wake up one morning and decide the rules have changed. Every rule is explicit, public, and enforced by the network itself. The most counterintuitive part is this. Bitcoin doesn't require you to trust the network either. You don't have to believe that miners are honest. You don't have to believe that other participants are acting in good faith. You don't even have to believe that the majority is right. You only have to verify. This is where Bitcoin draws a sharp line between trust and truth. Trust says, I believe this is correct because someone I rely on says so. Verification says, I know this is correct because I can independently check it. Bitcoin replaces the former with the latter. Every transaction follows strict mathematical rules. Either those rules are satisfied or the transaction is rejected. There is no appeal to authority, no special exception, no human judgment involved. The network doesn't care who you are, how important you think you are, or how convincing your story sounds. This is deeply unsettling to systems built on reputation and power. In Bitcoin, credibility does not come from titles or institutions. It comes from compliance with rules that treat everyone equally. The phrase often associated with Bitcoin, don't trust, verify, is not a slogan. It's a design principle. It assumes that trust is a liability, not an asset, when building global systems. Trust can be manipulated. Verification cannot. This is why Bitcoin doesn't need you to know who created it. The identity of Satoshi Nakamoto is irrelevant to whether Bitcoin works. If tomorrow we discovered everything about Satoshi, it would change nothing about the protocol. The system stands or falls on mathematics, not mythology. Contrast this with traditional finance, where confidence often hinges on personalities. Central bankers give speeches. Leaders reassure markets. Institutions issue statements designed to calm fear. The system relies on belief management as much as it relies on numbers. Bitcoin doesn't reassure you. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't promise stability or prosperity. It simply runs. If the rules are followed, the system functions. If they are broken, it doesn't matter who broke them. The system rejects the attempt. This is not flexibility. It's rigidity by design. And in a world where money has been endlessly bent to suit political needs, rigidity is a feature, not a flaw. Bitcoin's rules are not hidden in legal documents few people read. They are embedded in open source code that anyone can inspect. You don't need permission to participate. You don't need approval to verify. You can run the software yourself and check, block by block, that everything adds up. This introduces a subtle but profound shift in responsibility. In traditional systems, responsibility flows upward. You outsource trust to institutions and hope they manage it well. In Bitcoin, responsibility flows inward. You are empowered to verify the truth for yourself. That empowerment is uncomfortable. It removes excuses. You can no longer say, I didn't know, or I trusted the system. Bitcoin does not protect you from ignorance. It offers transparency and expects maturity in return. This is why Bitcoin often feels cold, even hostile to newcomers. It does not hold your hand. It does not promise to save you from mistakes. It does not pretend that participation is effortless. Freedom rarely is. Yet within this harshness lies something revolutionary. For the first time, money exists that does not require faith in institutions, leaders, or narratives. It does not care about your politics, your nationality, or your social status. It only cares whether the math checks out. Bitcoin does not ask you to believe in it. It asks you to understand it. And once you do, trust becomes irrelevant. At that point, a quiet realization begins to form. If money can work without trust, what else have we assumed must rely on belief simply because we've never seen an alternative? Bitcoin doesn't answer that question directly. It doesn't need to. By existing, it proves that replacing trust with verification is not only possible, but powerful. And the engine behind that replacement is something far older and far more unforgiving than any institution. It is mathematics. Mathematics is indifferent. It does not care who you are, what you believe, or how badly you want an exception. 2 plus 2 does not become 5 because a majority agrees it should. A proof does not bend under pressure, and an equation does not respond to authority. This is precisely why Bitcoin chose mathematics as its foundation. For most of human history, rules were enforced by people. Kings declared laws. Courts interpreted them. Institutions decided when they applied and when they didn't. Even when rules were written down, their execution depended on human judgment, and human judgment is never neutral. It is shaped by incentives, fear, loyalty, and power. Bitcoin removes judgment from the equation, not metaphorically, but literally. In Bitcoin, the rules are not guidelines. They are constraints. They are expressed in code, enforced by cryptography, and validated through consensus mechanisms that do not require trust in intentions, only adherence to logic. A transaction is either valid or it is not. There is no middle ground. There is no debate. Cryptography plays a central role here, but not in the way people often imagine. It is not about secrecy or hiding information. Bitcoin is remarkably transparent. Every transaction is visible. Every rule is public. Cryptography ensures something far more important, that the past cannot be altered and that ownership cannot be forged. Once a transaction is confirmed, reversing it would require rewriting history itself. Not politically, not legally, but mathematically. The amount of energy and computation required to do so grows so large that it becomes economically irrational. This is not trust. This is physics and economics aligned through math. The brilliance of Bitcoin lies in how it turns incentives into enforcement. Instead of assuming good behavior, it rewards correct behavior. Miners do not secure the network because they are virtuous. They do it because the math makes honesty more profitable than cheating. The system does not moralize, it calculates. This is a fundamental departure from traditional systems, where rules are enforced by threats and compliance is often coerced. In Bitcoin, compliance is voluntary, but unavoidable if you wish to participate. You are free to attempt to break the rules, but you will simply be ignored. The network will not argue with you. It will not punish you. It will proceed as if you do not exist. That silence is powerful. Mathematics has no ego. It does not escalate conflicts. It does not compromise to maintain appearances. It does not care about your intentions, only your results. This makes it uniquely suited to coordinate strangers at a global scale. Bitcoin leverages this by ensuring that every participant operates under the same constraints. There are no privileged actors, no backdoors, no emergency overrides. The same rules apply whether you are a single individual running a node on a laptop or a multinational operation with vast resources. This equality before the rules is not a political statement. It is a mathematical one. The code does not know who you are, and it does not need to. Identity is irrelevant when verification is universal. Consider how radical this is in a world obsessed with credentials. In Bitcoin, you do not prove your legitimacy by who you are, but by what you can demonstrate. Ownership is proven with cryptographic keys, not documents. Validity is proven with computation, not persuasion. Even the monetary policy itself is governed by math. The issuance of new Bitcoins follows a predictable schedule that cannot be accelerated by urgency or slowed by convenience. There are no meetings to adjust supply, no emergency measures, no reinterpretations of intent. The rules were set at the beginning and are enforced continuously by every participant who chooses to run the software. This is often criticized as inflexibility, and it is inflexible. Intentionally so. Flexibility in money has historically meant that rules change when those in power feel pressured. Bitcoin removes that option entirely. It does not ask leaders to be disciplined. It makes indiscipline impossible. What emerges is something unprecedented, a system where trust is not placed in people, but in constraints, not in promises, but in proofs, not in authority, but in arithmetic. This does not mean Bitcoin is perfect or immune to failure. It means that its failures, if they occur, will not be the result of hidden decisions or quiet betrayals. They will be visible, measurable, and rooted in logic. There will be no mystery about what went wrong. In a sense, Bitcoin treats adults like adults. It does not protect them with comforting narratives. It offers clarity and expects them to deal with the implications. You are free to opt out. You are free to disagree. But if you choose to participate, you do so under rules that do not bend for you. There is something deeply honest about this arrangement. No speeches, no assurances, no appeals to trust, just a system that says, here are the rules, here is the math, check it yourself. And once you do, something changes. You begin to see how much of the world relies not on truth, but on agreed upon stories. How often stability is maintained not by certainty, but by belief. Bitcoin does not try to replace every system built on trust. It simply demonstrates that, at least in the realm of money, trust is optional. When rules are enforced by mathematics, power loses its usual levers. You cannot bribe an equation. You cannot intimidate a proof. You cannot lobby a hash function. That is why Bitcoin is so unsettling. It introduces a form of order that does not need to be watched, defended, or believed in. It simply exists, running quietly, block after block, indifferent to opinion. And in that indifference, it offers something rare, a system where fairness is not promised, but enforced. And that brings us to the final question. If money no longer requires trust, what does that mean for freedom itself? When people talk about freedom, they often imagine the absence of rules. No restrictions, no constraints, no one telling them what they can or cannot do. But history suggests something very different. True freedom rarely emerges from chaos. It emerges from systems where rules are clear, predictable, and applied equally. Bitcoin embodies this idea in an unusual way. It does not free you by removing structure. It frees you by removing arbitrariness. In traditional financial systems, freedom is conditional. You are free to use your money as long as someone else agrees, as long as accounts remain open, as long as policies don't change, as long as you stay within invisible boundaries that can be redrawn without notice. Your access is granted, not inherent. Bitcoin changes this relationship. Participation is not something you are allowed to do. It is something you can do. No application, no approval, no identity required. If you follow the rules, the system accepts you. If you don't, it ignores you. There is no middleman to negotiate with and no authority to appeal to. This kind of freedom is uncomfortable because it comes without guarantees. Bitcoin does not protect you from your own mistakes. It does not reverse transactions because you regret them. It does not freeze funds because you ask nicely. The same rules that protect you from others also apply to you. That symmetry is the point. When freedom is based on trust, it is fragile. It depends on continued goodwill. It assumes restraint from those in power. It requires constant vigilance to ensure promises are kept. Over time, exceptions accumulate. Emergencies justify shortcuts. Temporary measures become permanent. And slowly, freedom erodes without a single dramatic moment. Bitcoin offers a different foundation. Freedom enforced by rules rather than granted by permission. Stability derived from predictability rather than authority. Confidence rooted in verification rather than belief. This does not make Bitcoin a utopia. It makes it honest. There is no pretense that everyone will act ethically. There is no expectation that power will always be used wisely. Instead, the system acknowledges human nature and limits the damage it can do. You cannot print more Bitcoin because it feels necessary. You cannot confiscate funds because it seems justified. You cannot rewrite history because it would be convenient. Those actions are not forbidden by decree. They are made impossible by design. This is why Bitcoin feels less like a financial product and more like an infrastructure. It does not care about your goals. It does not optimize for comfort. It provides a neutral base layer upon which individuals can build, transact, and coordinate without needing to trust one another. In a world increasingly defined by polarization and distrust, this neutrality matters. Bitcoin does not take sides. It does not enforce ideology. It does not reward loyalty. It simply enforces rules. And paradoxically, that enforcement creates space for genuine choice. When the rules are fixed and transparent, individuals can plan. They can assess risk. They can take responsibility. Freedom is no longer something that can be quietly revoked. It is something that persists as long as the math holds. This reframes the idea of trust itself. Bitcoin does not eliminate trust from human relationships. It removes the burden of trust from the system. You are free to trust people again because your money no longer depends on it. That distinction is subtle but profound. It separates personal relationships from structural dependence. It allows cooperation without vulnerability to betrayal at scale. It acknowledges that while trust can be meaningful between individuals, it is dangerous when demanded by institutions with immense power. Bitcoin does not claim to be the future of everything. It does not promise fairness in all aspects of life. What it demonstrates is narrower, but no less important. Money does not have to be based on belief. It can be based on rules that anyone can verify, on mathematics that does not bend, on incentives that align honesty with self-interest, on systems that function whether or not you believe in them. This is why debates about whether Bitcoin is backed by something miss the point. It is not backed by gold, governments, or guarantees. It is backed by logic, by energy, by computation, by the collective enforcement of rules that no single participant controls. In a sense, Bitcoin represents a maturation of society's relationship with trust. It says, trust is valuable, but it should be earned, not required. It should exist between people, not be demanded by systems. The shift is quiet, but its implications are vast. When money no longer depends on belief, power must justify itself differently. When rules cannot be changed quietly, accountability increases. When verification replaces faith, manipulation becomes harder. Bitcoin does not ask you to have hope. It does not ask you to believe in a better world. It does not ask you to trust anyone. It asks you to look, to read the rules, to check the math, to verify the truth for yourself. And once you do, you may realize something unexpected. The most reliable systems are not those built on promises, but those built on constraints. Not those that ask for trust, but those that make trust unnecessary. Bitcoin does not require trust. It uses mathematics.